What's going on, everybody? She's finally here. Yuna, Grand Summoner. Uh, if you knew me in real life, you would know that the moment they announced there was going to be a Final Fantasy Magic set, I said, I don't care what Yuna does, I'm just going to build her. She's my favorite Final Fantasy character. I love her story arc. I love her as a character. I love her. I play a summoner in Final Fantasy 14, and I made her initially look as much like Yuna as I could possibly make her. So I had to build this deck, and it was actually a lot more difficult because you can go a lot of different directions with this commander. She is extraordinarily versatile and powerful, and she's very broken. They even call her the Unabomber because she can just drop really powerful. Uh, this was not the most powerful version of the deck, I think. I'm quite certain that people can fine tune it and make it a little bit more powerful, but I want it to be powerful yet flavorful. So we'll just dive right into it. So Yuna Grand Summoner, she is a 4-drop. She needs Bant Colors +1. She's a 1/5, and she has Grand Summon. You tap and add 1 mana of any color. When you next cast a creature spell this turn, that creature enters with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it. Now, one thing to note about this, and it'll become more relevant as we get into the deck, is if you tap her and you somehow untap her and then retap her, that 2 additional +1/+1 counters stacks. So if you tap her once, it's 2 additional +1/+. But if you untap her and tap her again, now the creature's coming in with 4 +1/+1 counters. That's extraordinarily important going forward because we will have some ways to abuse that, and you'll see how. Now the second part, when another permanent you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, if it had 1 or more counters on it, you may put that number +1/+1 counters on target creature. Now, this just means that every time, it just means that your board is constantly going to be big. So they're going to have to board wipe you in order to really shut you down. So, of course, we're going to have answers to that, of course. But uh, let's go ahead and see some of the combo pieces real quick down here. So, freed from the real is a enchant creature aura. It's an enchantment aura, which you obviously enchant to a creature. You can pay 1 blue to tap enchanted creature, or pay a blue to untap enchanted creature. Now here's what's crazy about Yuna, right? Um, Yuna, when you tap her, you add 1 mana of any color. So let's say you tap her and with a freed from the real attached to her, and you say, I'll add blue to my mana pool, and then you just use that blue to untap her and then tap her again. And then you can just do this an infinite number of times. Of course, in Magic, we don't do infinite, so say like 10,000 or whatever. I would personally say 100,000 just to make it a little bit more flavorful, but that's you do you. So that's one of the ways that we can make an absurdly large creature. So then next time we cast a creature, we are going to have 100,000 um, counters on it. Pinma's Aura essentially does the exact same thing. It's got a couple extra stuff you could do on there, but really we're just looking at it for this line, just to untap Yuna. And here is one of our BS awesome combo pieces. So this creature enters with X +1/+1 counters on it. So it's XX, which means that you have to if you pay 2, you get a 1 +1/+1 counter on it, right? So you have to pay 1 mana for each X. It's kind of confusing. So basically, you just have to double. Just divide by 2. So, sorry. The amount of mana, the amount of power +1/+1 counters that come on this is divided by 2 for the amount of mana you spent. So if you spent 4 mana, you only get 2 +1/+1 counters. You spend 6 mana, you get 3 +1/+1 counters, so forth. Sorry, I don't know how to talk sometimes. But that's not really relevant here because when you just pay 2, because the minimum you can pay is 2, X can't be 0, uh, and you've already triggered Yuna 100,000 times or whatever, this thing's coming in with so many counters on it that it's not going to matter. Now, you could pay for it to put a +1/+1 counter on it, but if you've got 1,000 or 100,000 counters on it, this is the thing that's scary. Remove a +1/+1 counter from this creature. It does 1 damage to any target. So this plus Yuna plus freed from the real or Pinman's aura is instant death to your entire table because if this thing hits the ground with enough counters on it to kill everybody, you just win. Um, with that being said, we're gonna slip right in. I'm gonna show you all another combo later with this guy. So Yuna's one way to just bring him down and kill everybody, but there's another way that's kind of sneaky that we'll talk about in a bit. We do have one board wipe, Damning Verdict. It obviously we're gonna use as many of the Final Fantasy 10 cards as we can. Destroys all creatures with no counters on them. Most of our guys are going to have counters on them. So this is a one-sided board wipe, and anytime we can slip a one-sided board wipe into our deck, we do, because that's awesome. Now we also need some card draw. So Inspiring Call, draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Well, like I said, we're going to have a bunch of those, so we're going to get a bunch of cards. But then, those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. So card draw plus protection, we love it. Remember, your opponents are going to be trying to take out your guys, and a board wipe is the only thing that shuts down, that really hinders this second ability for Yuna. So we're not going to let that happen. They're just not going to. We're just going to make it to where they can't board wipe us. Kutzil Malamet Exemplar. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. That's cool, but it's fine. It's a fun ability. Make sure that they can't counter your stuff. But also, whenever one or more creatures you control, each with power greater than its base power deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. That means that every creature you have with a +1/+1 counter on it is going to draw you a card. So it's absolutely wonderful card for this deck. It's going in there. And of course, I put the One Ring in there. I think this is just a fantastic card draw. Um, and you know, it'll have its moments where it just saves you. It's indestructible. When the One Ring enters, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything till your next turn. So you know, use it in a pinch if you have to. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the ring. Okay. If you tap it, you put a burden counter on the ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the ring. So, you know, maybe tap it 1, 2 times, get you an extra card, you know. Uh, there is some life gain in this deck, so you're able to counteract this a little bit, but it's just a great card. It protects you and gives you a little bit. And then Titus, Yuna's Guardian, is also, there's a couple of different categories we could have put him in, but we put him in card draw. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may move a counter from target creature you control onto a second target creature you control. This is really good. Being able to move counters and specifically move any type of counter, not just a +1/+1, is going to be really impactful for this deck, and you'll see why as we get into some of the summons. But that's really good. But his cheer is whenever one or more creatures you control with counters on them deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card and proliferate. Do this only once each turn. So you swing out and you only get 1 card because it says 1 or more. So it doesn't say whenever a creature you control with counters on it. If it said that, then you would get a card for each creature that dealt damage. But because it's worded with whenever 1 or more creatures, just means that during your combat, as long as 1 creature deals combat damage, has a +1/+1 counter on it, you're going to draw a card. But if you have multiple creatures, you're still just going to draw 1 card. But you also get to proliferate, which means that for every counter on target permanent, you get to add another one of those counters. So you get to make your +1/+1 counters go up. You can also make the lore counters go up, which you know does bring your sagas closer to death, which we'll get to in just a second. But sometimes, but you also get the benefit of the lore counter being put on it, and you might want that. So there's a lot of versatility in this deck, and a lot of ways to utilize your summons, which is just it's fantastic flavor. So, um, and then of course we have 2 counter spells. An offer you can't refuse. Counter target non-creature spell. A controller creates 2 creature tokens. Only costs 1. I recommend that you save your counter spells for one of two reasons. One, somebody is about to do something that will wreck your game state. Uh, they're going to kill Yuna. They're going to stop your walking ballista. Counter that. Don't just counter something that's like big and scary on their end. That's for like more counterspell heavy decks. But this, you're only trying to protect a vital aspect of your deck. So if you throw something out there and it's not that big of a deal, if it died or if it was on the field and it doesn't really hurt your game plan, don't counter it. Just let them waste their counter spells. Only counter what you must. The other thing that you can counter is if somebody's about to play something that will win them the game, obviously counter that. Um, but yeah, those are the two recommended counters. So then we have Fierce Guardianship, which I think the Guardianship in the title is just kind of it's poetic for the deck. If you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. And then you counter non-target creature spells. So we're not countering any of their creatures, which is, kind of unfortunate. Um, we're mostly trying to stop a board wipe, kill spell, or counter spell. Or any crazy spell that they might do that will like win them the game. Um, so let me show you. So those are counter spells. We have one extra turn. Sage of Hours, Heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets this creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. We're not going to have too many of those, but the second one's really important. Remove all +1/+1 counters from this creature. For each 5 counters removed this way, take an extra turn after this one. Now remember, Yuna can bring things in with two +1/+1 counters on it, or more, depending on what it is. So you could potentially cast this, and if you break Yuna's tapping ability, like I showed you earlier, and you have 100,000 counters on this thing, well, you're gonna win the game because you get 100,000 turns. And if you can't win from there, I don't know what to tell you. But also, Titus moves counters around, right? So anything that moves or adds counters around, like Inspiring Call adds counters. Um, no, it doesn't. Inspiring Call draws you cards for count. But other things will add counters to it, right? So you don't really have to target anything, specifically anything to this character. You're going to get a bunch of counters. So that's why I threw him in there. You're going to be able to cheat in some extra turns every now and again, and that is always fun. Um, okay, we're gonna go over mana ramp. Did we do everything here? We didn't do double trouble. We'll do double trouble in a minute. We'll do mana ramp because I want to show you how summons work. Obviously, cultivate, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Reveal those cards, put them onto the battlefield tap, and the other into your hand. Then shuffle. So you get one battlefield, one into your hand. Great. Incubation Druid. This is a mana dork, which is just a creature, a low-cost creature that lets you add mana. You add 1 mana of any type of land that a land you control could produce. If this creature has a +1/+1 counter on it, add 3 mana of those types instead. So uh, again, it's not going to be hard to get +1/+1 counters on any of your creatures in this deck. But this also can adapt 3. If this creature has no +1/+1 counters on it, put 3 +1/+1 counters on it. You can use this in a pinch, or like if you get them early game and you don't have any of your other stuff going. But honestly, you probably won't need this too often because of Yuna and other cards that are just putting +1/+1 counters on it. But this is just to trigger the add 3 mana instead. So great for this deck particularly. Kami of the Whisper hopes if one or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a permanent you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put on that permanent instead. That's really important, and I'm going to show you why once we get done with the second ability. Add X mana of any one color where X is this creature's power. So again, this creature is probably going to have a lot of +1/+1 counters on it, and you're going to be able to the mana ramp in this deck should be absurd. Now, with this ability, there's another card in here that does the same thing. Actually, a couple cards that I think do the same thing. Let's go back to Walking Ballista for a minute. You remove a +1/+1 counter from this creature. Deal 1 damage to any target. Uh, sorry. No. Sorry, that's not it. we'll get to it, but just remember that. Just remember that there are things that will add a +1 plus, like give you an additional +1/+1 counter, and keep walking ballista in your mind as we come through this or work our way through this deck. Um, the Sanctum Weave, add X mana of any color, where X is the number of enchantments you control. Well, that's an enchantment, and you'll see that we have a lot of all our summoners are enchantments, right? So this is our first summoner we're going to talk about. It's the enchantment creature. So all your summoners count as enchantments for this purpose. And we're gonna bring our summoners, our summon creatures out, and we're gonna keep them out as long as possible. We're gonna do a lot of cool stuff with them. So, summon Finra. As this saga enters, and after your draw step, add a lore counter. Sacrifice after 3. So when you play this, you're gonna add a lore counter, and then you're gonna get this first ability right here. Okay, Crescent Fang. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tapped. Now, sagas usually just sit to the side, do their things, but this is also a creature. So you'll put it next to your creatures. It's a 3/2 uh, creature. So not only are you getting something off of it every turn, you're able to attack and defend with it. Obviously, you probably don't want to defend if you're going to lose your guy. But, you know, if the situation calls for it, you got to do what you got to do. But every turn, it's going to get a new thing. Now, when it hits turn 3, so this is turn 1 when you cast it, this is turn 2, and then this will be turn 3, you'll sacrifice it, right? Which means it'll go away. Now, you don't necessarily want to sacrifice your creatures. So, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can get rid of our lore counters. Um, but so just keep that in mind. We will have ways to get rid of our lore counters so that we could keep this creature going for as long as possible. But when we do that, just remember that when you hit this, so turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, it's not turn 3, then you get to play it, and then turn 4, you get rid of it. It's turn 3, this triggers, and then you immediately sacrifice your guy. So just keep that in mind. Uh, so we already talked about his turn 1. His turn 2 is when you next cast a creature spell this turn, that creature enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So you see what I'm saying? We're like doubling up our counters like hard. Um, and then his final is draw a card if you control a creature with the greatest power or tied for the greatest power. Again, this is cool, but a lot of times we're not going to see this without our creature dying, and we don't really want him to die. So use this if you got to, because we will have ways to bring our summons back, even from the graveyard, provided our opponents don't get rid of our graveyard. But just keep in mind this and is mostly the one that like your center one. Um, or sorry, not the center one. The one before the final is probably what's going to happen the most uh, recurring. So just keep that in mind when you think about the summons. I know it's a lot, and I know I'm probably like spending way too much time garbling this kind of information, but hopefully it'll make sense as we go through the deck and you see. This was a kind of complicated deck. Simic colors are going to be for the most part, and now we're also adding white, and we're also adding a bunch of jank to this. But hopefully this will make sense as we go through like what I did with the deck. Um, so then we got 2 party buffers. These are just things that like improve your creatures by and by. So when this creature enters, put a +1/+1 on target creature. So you know if you put your incubation druid out, and then next turn you put this guy out, you can go ahead and put that +1/+1 counter on your druid so that it could tap for 3 mana. That's just something you can do, or you know put it on walking ballista, whatever. It's just. But the second one is each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has trample. We want our creatures to have trample in this deck because we just want them to be big and scary, and we're coming for your life. Um, Also, it's a Final Fantasy 10 card, so I had to put it in there. And then the Spear Grid, which is awesome. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. Awesome. Unlockability. Creatures you control with a +1/+1 counter on them have reach and trample. Okay, so like I said, we really want them to have trample, and this is giving them everything we need. So awesome card for that. Um, Now, let's go over to Double Trouble. This is basically stuff that will help get as many +1/+1 counters as you can. When this creature enters, doubles the number, the kind of counter on any number of target creatures. Um, so I, I'm pretty sure we can look at the gathering, but I'm pretty sure that I get to pick and choose. So if I have +1/+1 counters and I have lore counters, I can pick. Let's see what the rulings are. You can choose no targets if you don't have double the counters on any permanent. To double the number of each kind of counter on a permanent, put another counter on it for each counter it already has. Effects that interact with counters being put onto a permanent supply. Okay. Okay, no. So this is a relevant ruling here. So if you target a saga, like sorry, if you set summon one of, if you target one of Yuna's summons with this card, you will have to double the lore counter and the +1/+1. Every counter on it, you're gonna have to double all of it. You don't get to say, well, I'll leave the lore counters alone so I don't kill my creature. Nope, that's gotta go. Um, but this guy's in here for not just the summons. He's really in here for the win cons, and we'll talk about that when we get to the win cons, and I'll bring you back to this guy and show you. But so again, I know there's a lot of stuff to keep in your mind going forward with this deck, but again, very complicated deck, very versatile and all over the place. But if you can master this deck, I think you're going to be a powerhouse on the battlefield. Flux Channeler. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Proliferate, which is to choose any number of permanents and/or players, then give each another counter of each kind they already have. So every time you cast a non-creature spell, you're just going to get more counters on everything. You might not target your summons if it's going to kill them, but if it doesn't, go ahead. Let let them get another lore counter and get their awesome effect off. So this can get really scary, and you can have multiple summons going off at the same time. This will make your turns complicated and long, but the effects that you're bringing to the table are going to be very powerful, which is exactly how a summoner ought to be. Hardened scales. If one or more +1/+1 would be put on a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put on instead. So that's just like that other card. And again, think about this: Walking Ballista and its potential. And we'll get to a cool card with that in a second. The Earth Crystal, had to put a crystal in there. Green spells you cast cost one less to cast. So all your green spells already just cost one less. That means if you have this out, for some reason before Yuna, you can cast her for 3 mana because it'll get rid of that generic. But anyway, if one or more +1/+1 counters will be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. So again, we're just making more and more counters. It's just going to go big. And then for 6, you can tap it to distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures you control. This is really 4 because of this line. So this is a really powerful ability if you got to. I don't think we'll be using this a whole lot, but it's there for options. And if, as you know, I like options. Um, Now, strictly speaking, in this particular deck, this is 100% better than Doubling Season. While Doubling Season will do tokens plus this, um, uh, um, I think the way Doubling Season is worded uh, prevents. It would also mean that we are doing lore counters up as well. Let's see. If an effect will create one or more tokens, if an effect will put one or more counters, right? So it's not just +1/+1 counters. Doubling Season will actually increase the lore counters as well, which we don't really want. Also, Doubling Season is a lot more expensive if you care about that than this card. It's about 3 times as expensive, but this is way better than Doubling Season in this deck because it won't double the lore counters. So remember, we're trying to find that smooth line where we are doubling counters, but not all counters. We don't necessarily want to double our lore counters if we can help it. And then the Ozolith, whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may move all counters from the Ozolith onto target creature. That sounds a lot like this ability. Whenever a permanent you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, if it had one or more counters on it, you would put that number of +1/+1 counters on target creature. Now, let's talk about a wordplay here. Magic is very much about wordplay. And this specifically says when something dies, or sorry, uh, yeah, when something dies, if it had counters on it, I can take the amount of counters it has and put that many on another target creature. What Ozolith says is at the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has, whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on, put those counters on the Ozolith. Those counters, the way that's worded, means that you're not, you're literally moving the counters from the creature that's dying onto the Ozolith. But the way um, Yuna is worded means that I'm just putting that many onto another target creature. If Yuna was worded this way, you wouldn't get both. You would have to pick, go to the Ozolith, go to the new creature. But because Yuna's worded the way that she is, if you have Yuna out and you have this, you'll get both. You'll be able to transfer, let's say I have 5+1/+1 counters on a creature that's dying. I'll get to put 5 counters on the Ozolith and 5 counters on another creature thanks to Yuna. I'll get both effects, and as you can imagine, that can get bonkers really fast. So it's a really, really cool little loopy thing. Um, so yeah, okay. So that's everything on this side, and we've gone over mana ramp, and we've gone over party buffs. Um, let's go over resummon. So these are ways to get your summons back. So you resurgent belief, suspend 2 rather than cast this card from your hand. Pay 2 and exile it with 2 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter. When the last is removed, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. Return all enchantment creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield. Um, all your summons are enchantments, so if you're sitting on this and you know that you're gonna lose a bunch of your summons, or you already have lost a bunch of your summons, you can go ahead and cast this, and then when this thing goes off, all your summons are coming back. So, talk about a limit break, right? Uh, and then together forever, when this enchantment enters, support 2. Put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. And then for 1, you choose target creature with a counter on it. When that creature dies this turn, return that card to its owner's hand. This is the golden card of the deck for me. Um, so you can activate this as something's about to kill your creature. Now, you will want to activate this before your draw step if the lore counter is going to kick off and kill your creature, because you won't really have a chance to do it beforehand. But that's just a minor technical point that your table should be fine helping you through. Um, but yeah, this just gives you, and then because it does, you don't have to tap it, and for every, like, you could have 3 of your creatures die and just pay 3 mana and get those 3 summons back so that you can recast them. Maybe you don't have the mana to cast them now, but you will on your next turn. This is absolutely fantastic, absolutely necessary for this deck. I love being able to bring my summons back. Now, let's talk about sustained summons. This category is about keeping your summons onto the battlefield for as long as possible. So, Clash of the Icons. Choose one or more. Target creature you control fights target creature an opponent controls. That's cool. Remove a lore counter from target target you control. Removing lore counters doesn't cause chapter abilities to trigger. This is why this card's in this deck. So, if you've got, let's go back to Thinner. Okay, if he's on 2, on your next turn he's going to go to 3, and this ability will go off, but then he'll go into the graveyard. Well, you can cast Icon on him, the Clash of the Icon, and it will put him back to 1. It won't cause this to trigger, but on your next turn, this will trigger again. And it just keeps him around for one more turn. Now that's an instant. It's a fun card. This is an easily replaceable card. There's a couple of cards I've thought about replacing this, but just for now, this is where we're at. You can also put a lure counter on target saga you control, and you might do that even if it kills your summon to get the benefit of its final chapter. Usually, final chapter is pretty powerful, so there are going to be times when you're going to want to actually just kill off your summons, especially if you have like Together Forever out or another way. Oh, we missed one. Sorry. So we'll go back. So we're talking about the resummons together forever. Um, so then we have Yuna, Hope of Spira. During your turn, Yuna and enchantment creatures you control have Trample. Remember, we want Trample. Lifelink, which will help out with the one ring, and Ward 2, which means that if they want to target and get rid of your summons, they're going to have to pay an extra 2 for it. Doesn't really stop people, but it does slow them down, which is all you kind of need sometimes. At the beginning of your end step, return up to one target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. If a permanent with a finality counter on it would be put into the graveyard from the battlefield, exile it instead. Okay, so every turn at the end of our at our end step, we'll be able to take one of our enchantment cards and bring it back to the battlefield. Now, when it comes back to the battlefield, it will trigger its Chapter 1 ability, so you get that. But it also have a finality counter on it, which means that if it dies again, it gets exiled, which we don't really like. Okay, we're not trying to exile our guys, but you'll see that we do have some ways to manipulate that, and like we could move the finality counter around with Tidus onto something that doesn't, we might not care as much about. We'll have some options to get rid of that finality counter. Again, I kind of built the deck with trying to keep my summons on the battlefield for as long as possible. So sorry, I had to go back to that one. But so sustain, this is resummons, how we get our guys back, and then sustain is how we're going to move forward um, and keep them on the battlefield without some silly stuff. I'm sorry, this video is going to go kind of long, but it's a lot and it's confusing, and I'm kind of silly about explaining things. So Garnet, Princess of Alexandria, she has lifelink, again, one ring, and lifelinks are always okay. Whenever Garnet attacks, you may remove a lore counter from each of any number of sagas you control. Put a +1/+1 on Garnet for each lore counter removed this way. Okay, so just she attacks and she makes all our summons back up a bit, which is definitely going to keep them on. So we like that a lot. Oaka, Traveling Merchant. Remove a counter from a non-land permanent you control, draw a card. Okay, so we can tap him to remove a, um, a lore counter, but we can also remove that finality counter we were just talking about with Yuna, Hope of Spira. So he's absolutely amazing in this deck. He's definitely going to keep your guys around and keep them safe, especially with the other Yuna on the battlefield. And then Power Conduit. Remove a counter from a permanent you control. Choose one. Put a charge counter on target artifact, or put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Okay, so I'll remove that finality and or lore counter, or sorry, I will remove that finality or the lore counter to put a +1/+1 on it instead. Awesome. Now this one's a big one. It feels kind of sacrilegious to put him in and use him, but he was a summon, so all right, here we go. Sin, Unending Cataclysm, Flying Trample. Okay, that's busted. As Sin enters, remove all counters from any number of artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Sin enters with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is twice the number of counters removed this way. When Sin dies, put its counters on target creature you control, then shuffle this card into its owner's library. Wow, so this could absolutely reset a lot of stuff. It will remove your counters, but it will make him a really big, beefy dude. Um, but this will definitely keep your guys around a lot. This last part, remember what we were talking about with the Ozolith? About this? Since it's worded the same way, if you have Sin and this out, you will not get to put its counters on the Ozolith and another creature. You will have to pick one. Um, just because it's wording. But it's also, Yuna will still function the same way. It doesn't really impact how Yuna works. Um, So that's how we're going to keep our summons going longer. And then we have our resummons. So with that, you're going to see. Now, we've only shown one summon so far, but I promise you we have more. I'm just saving them. But we'll get into some of them right here. So now we have Spectral Strike, which is I want to be able to swing with either trample or some way where like if I'm going in, I'm getting you. I don't want you chump blocking me in any way with this. I want you gone with this deck. That's how I designed it. So Herald of the Secret Stream, creatures you control +1/+1 on it, can't be blocked. Bam. this should make it to where they don't even get a chance to try to stop you. You're just going in there, and you're just getting your damage in there. So this is absolutely great. Jill, Shiva's dominant. When Jill enters, return up to one target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So go ahead and just get rid of whatever you don't like about them. And then exile Jill for 5. Then return to the battlefield, transform under its owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery. When you activate her, she comes in as Shiva, Warden of Ice. As this saga enters you after you draw a step, add a lore counter. So 1 and 2, which means that when she enters and on her next turn she'll get mesmerized. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. Okay. See what I'm saying? Like we're not messing around here. We're not giving you the option to defend. We're just going broke. We're just gonna mess you up. And then if you have to sacrifice her, you can tap all lands your opponents control. This is opponents, which means all of your opponents. Um, and then you exile Shiva and return to the battlefield face up. So I like it because if she does go off, she'll come back as a creature, and you'll have to resummon her again. But it's kind of nice. And then we have Riku, Resourceful Guardian. Whenever you put one or more counters on a creature until end of turn, that creature can't be blocked by creatures your opponents control. So yeah, I mean, again, we're putting just so many +1/+1 counters on it. She'll likely be able to get you there. And then, still, move a counter from target creature and opponent controls onto target creature you control. Activate it only as a sorcery. So yeah, it's likely that this won't come in, this won't be relevant every time, but it will be something nice from time to time, especially if your opponent has creatures like the incubation druid that needs a +1/+1 counter. Maybe you can just steal their counters and then you kind of turn it off for them. Um, yeah, so that's just kind of a cool thing. So these are just ways to get damage in without being blocked. We have our resummons, our spectrals. We'll just go talk about our choosers real quick. We're only running 2. Search your library for an artifact or enchantment. Enchantment gets every summon card. Reveal it, then shuffle and put that card on top of it. And then, of course, same thing. Search your library for an enchantment card, reveal and put it. So basically, just search for whatever summon you want. We did party buffs. All right, let's talk about our removal. This is getting rid of stuff. Aaron, Venerated Guardian, Vigilant, Shooting Star. Whenever Orin attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. When you do, exile target creature defending player controls with power less than Orin's power until Orin leaves the battlefield. So this guy can get out of hand really quick, especially with Riku. Riku makes it to where he can't be blocked because you attack, then Riku put a counter on him, and then Riku already goes into effect before they can pick defenders. So this guy can just I mean, he's getting rid of, it's kind of slow. He's only getting rid of one thing, but it's every turn he's getting rid of things. And he's continuously putting counters on himself, which again is what we want, especially with things like the Earth Crystal out and Hardened Scales. You know, we're putting more than just +1/+1 counters on him more often than not. Beast Within, destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. This is permanent. This means you can destroy their land. You can destroy anything that they have on the table. Dion, Bahamut's dominant. During your turn, Dion and other knights you control have flying. He's a knight. I don't think we have many other knights, but you know, he'll have flying on your turn. When he enters, create a 2/2 white knight creature token, and that token will have flying. And then for 6, you can exile him, then return him to the battlefield transform under his owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery. Transforms into Bahamut. His 1 and 2 Wings of Light put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. Those creatures gain flying until end of turn. Um, So yeah, +1/+1 counters flying, make it more difficult to block. And then his Giga Flare, destroy target permanent, exile Bahamut, then return him to the battlefield. So you know you just it's basically a Beast Within without giving him a 3/3, and then you get your guy back, and he'll um, because you exile him. Because this is exile Bahamut, then return it to the battlefield, you're not just flipping him over. So he's leaving and then coming back, which means you're going to get this enter the battlefield effect again. Um, right here. I don't know, Jill. Did Jill have it enters the battlefield effect? Yeah, when Jill enters, return up to one target downline. So the same thing happens here. Sorry I didn't mention that earlier. When this goes off, you exile it, not just flip it. So you will get this enter the battlefield effect again. Okay, now we're gonna talk about some of our summons. Summon Bahamut. His 1 and 2. Destroy target non-land permanent. He costs 9, but Yuna makes him cost 1 less. And he's a big beefy, but he's a 9/9 that's already coming in, destroying things, drawing you 2 cards on turn 3, which is just awesome. Um, and then if you happen to get him here on turn, like you bring him in, you destroy uh, a non-land permanent, and then you're able to remove the counter, uh, you'll get to destroy another permanent on your next turn as well. So this could be really cool if you can kind of cycle this lore counter to be on this. You're just every draw step you're just gonna destroy something. You're just gonna destroy something, and that that's pretty powerful. And then draw 2 cards. Same thing. If you need to just draw 2 cards, that's pretty cool. That'd be 3 cards because your draw step, you draw a card, and then you're drawing 2 more cards. So getting 3 cards a turn with a 9/9 flying is pretty good. Um, and then, of course, you can Mega Flare. This creature deals damage equal to the total mana value of other permanents you control to each opponent. That could get kind of, that's kind of gross. We don't have any doubling damage in this, um, but yeah, you know, use it if you got to. And then we have Ixalan. Uh, I said Ixalan. Ixion. Yeah, Ixalan versus Ixion. Same, but different. All right. Exile target creature an opponent controls until this saga leaves the battlefield. Well, this is, you know, we don't really want him to leave the battlefield, so that's great. And then his 2 and 3 put a +1/+1 counter on up to 2 target creatures you control, gain 2 life. First strike, 3/3. It's pretty solid. He's in there. He's getting things out of the way for a moment. Yojimbo, exile target artifact, enchantment, or tapped creature an opponent controls. Until end of turn, creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each of those attacking creatures. Nice little like step back boo. And then, if you do happen to kill him off, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of opponents who control a creature of power 4 or greater. So, that can be pretty good. And then he has vigilance, and he's a 5/5, so he's swinging in. I love that these creatures have these powerful effects that just keep going off as the turn goes on. And when you have multiples out, there's just going to be a bunch of stuff happening all at once. It's going to be awesome. Waka, Devoted Guardian. He has Reach and Trample. He's a 4/4. And when Waka deals combat damage to a player, destroy up to 1 target artifact that player controls and put a +1/+1 counter on Waka. Um, so yeah, it's limited to artifacts, but this is their mana rocks, their soul rings, their arcane signets. This is slowing them down, and you're getting +1/+1 counters on them. But he also has this at the beginning of your end step. If a counter is put on Waka, this turn put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. So Waka is just gonna start buffing up your party as well. Um, a lot of these cards are just bombs on their own, and they just have to be dealt with. It is a lot of removal. It's 7, but some of it's very spotty, and your only real hard removal as a spell is Beast Within. Um, but I definitely wanted to keep these summons in, and Walker's just too flavorful to cut, and I already had to cut some Guardians out. So I did what I could, and yeah. With that being said, this video is getting really, really long, so I'm going to try to speed it up, and I might just kind of skip over the lands. Alright, so Crystal Fragment, equipped creature gets +1/+1. This is the protection category for the next few cards, which is ways to protect yourself. Um, this doesn't really do it, obviously. What we're really here for is this: exile this equipment, then return it to the battlefield, transform under its owner's control, activate only as a sorcery. We're looking for Alexander. He prevents all damage that would be dealt to creatures you control this turn. That's pretty good, especially if you keep that going. And then tap all creatures your opponents control. Um, this could, at the right moment, this could let you swing out and just kill everybody. So great for Alexander. Cyclonic Rift, of course, the OG protection. Return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand, but we're going to overload it and return everything, every non-land permanent. We're going to do this before it's our turn. Like when your buddy before you says, hey man, I'm going to end the turn and pass it to you, you'll be like, hold up, I'm going to Cyclonic Rift everybody's stuff, and I'm going to swing out and kill everybody. Or if they swing at you and you're going to die, Cyclonic Rift all their creatures back to their hand. Um, Gara and Luzu. Alright, this is a really important one. It has Flash. When Gata and Luzu enters, choose target creature you control. If damage would be dealt to that creature this turn, prevent that damage and put that many +1/+1 counters on it. Okay, let's go back to Walking Ballista, because this guy is growth. Walking Ballista. This creature enters with, remove a +1/+1 counter to this creature. It does 1 damage to any target. So with Gaza, with Luta and Gaza out, or if you cast Luta and Gaza, and you have Walking Ballista out, and you have something that adds more than just one counter on it, like Hardening Scales, you can remove a damage. You can remove a +1/+1 counter from Walking Ballista, and you can um, do 1 damage to it. Right? So you remove the +1/+1 counter, and it says that then you can do a damage to any target. Well, you choose the Walking Ballista, and Gaza says, no, damage will be prevented, and I'll put a +1/+1 counter on it, which would normally do nothing. But if you have something that doubles that up, like Hardening Scales, now you're putting 2 +1/+1 counters on it, which means I can remove 1 to put 2 on, remove 1 to put 2 on, remove 1 to put 2 on. I can do this an infinite number of times, making Walking Ballista. We'll just say we'll make him 100,000. We'll put 100,000 counters on it, which is enough to kill everybody. Then you just redistribute that damage to their life total. So Gaza and Luza with a doubling effect and Walking Ballista, you just win the game unless they can stop it. Heroic Intervention, permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible till end of turn. Starling Grove, this is kind of neat. Other enchantments you control have Shroud. This means you won't be able to target your summons because they're enchantments, but it also prevents your opponents from doing anything. And then sacrifice this enchantment, search your library for an enchantment card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, or shuffle your deck and put it on top of it. So that's not really the best use of this, but you do what you gotta do sometimes. The Mega Sisters. I almost kept this card, but it's just too fun not to put in it. This is like one of those things I'm talking about. Like this deck has a lot of cool. You've already seen some of the brokenness of this deck, but this deck is designed to be powerful but still flavorful. So I had to put the Mega Sisters in there. Uh, uh, you cut it if you want, but this is just my flair. Um, For all 3 chapters, you choose one at random, so you just roll like a 6-sided dice and you pick, you figure it out. This could be 1 and 2, or this can be 1 and 2, this can be 2 and 3, and this can be 4. And, sorry, this can be 1 and 2, this can be 3 and 4, and this can be 5 and 6. But whatever, you figure it out. Combat powers: put 3 +1/+1 on target creature. That's pretty, it's fine. Defense is really good. Put a shield counter on target creature. You gain 3 life. So shield counter basically says that the next time this thing would be destroyed or dealt damage, you prevent that and remove the shield token or counter. So that can keep your stuff pretty healthy. And then fight. This creature fights up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. It's a 5/5, so you're kind of beefy. You might be able to get there. And also, you're probably coming in there with like 20 +1/+1 counters on it or whatever. And it has haste, so we're swinging right away. We're gonna go. And then this is Shiva, Final Fantasy X's version. Heavenly Strike, tap target creature and opponent controls, put a stun counter on it. If a permanent with a stun counter on it would become untapped, remove 1 of those from it instead. So I tap something down and it won't untap during its next untap step, which is pretty cool. You could tap it down for like 3 turns or like multiple turns if you keep just removing the lore counter. Diamond Dust, draw a card for each tap creature your opponent controls. Pretty sure we had something earlier, the other Shiva, which just tapped down all my opponents. So if I need to, I could draw a lot of cards with both Shivas on the battlefield. Summon Valifor, again, not the most powerful summon, but too flavorful not to put in the deck. For me. Sonic Wings, each opponent chooses a creature with greatest mana value among creatures they control. Return those cards to their owner's hand. So I'm just really slowing you down, especially if I'm triggering this over and over again. And then the rest of his is tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. So Shiva and Valifor out, we're just stunning your guys out of the way. We're basically trying to nullify the battlefield with our powerful summons and just swing and just leave you no chance to really recover. And he's a flying 5/4. Pretty solid. Swiftfoot boots. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste. Obviously, we want this on Yuna, but we could transfer this provided we don't have this out. We can transfer it to one of our summons if we need to for a turn, just to give them haste. And then before we end the turn, if we have the mana, we'll put it right back on Yuna. So that's pretty much the whole deck, except we're going to talk about the two win cons, which are really fun. Simic Ascendancy, you can pay 3 to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Okay, that's fine. But whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, put that many growth counters on this enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if this enchantment has 20 or more growth counters on it, you win the game. This is stupid in this deck. We're going to get that so quickly it'll make your head spin. So this will be something that if they can't remove, you're going to kill the whole table real quickly, which is why we have a lot of protection in this deck, because we put things out there that are going to threaten the entire table and they will come after you. So we're trying to protect ourselves and put a lot of pressure. This is like a defense offensive deck all rolled into one, and it is gross. Now, one more win con. 20 Toad. Your maximum hand size is 20. That's fine. Whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature and draw a card. Whenever this creature attacks, you win the game if there are 20 or more counters on it, or you have 20 or more cards in hand. Yeah, so a little harder to pull off than Simic Ascendancy, I think, but it's definitely there. It's definitely a threat, and you shouldn't have too hard of a time putting 20 counters on a thing in this deck. So that's all like the main stuff. Now we'll move into like the mana stuff, and we're just gonna cover this really fast. I'm really sorry this video goes so long. I don't know how to speed these videos up, other than not talking and maybe scripting, but that ain't me. So here we go. Arcane Signet, of course. Add 1 mana of any color to your color's identity. Of course, we're gonna use Final Fantasy X-1. Chrome Mox Imprint. When this artifact enters, you may exile a non-artifact, non-land card from your hand. Add 1 mana of any of the exile's card color. So, enters, exile a non-artifact, non-land. Yeah, y'all get it. Y'all know how to read. This artifact doesn't untap during your untap step. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 4. If you do, untap this artifact. At the beginning of your draw step, if this artifact is tapped, it deals 1 damage to you. Add 3. Sometimes it's a one-hit wonder, but it's there. It's no mana crypt, but we do what we gotta do. Mox Diamond, if this artifact would enter, you may discard a land card. Instead, if you do, put the artifact onto the battlefield. If you don't, put it into his owner's graveyard. Add 1 mana of any color. And then, of course, we'll use the Final Fantasy X Soul Ring. So those are our mana rocks. I like running 5 mana rocks and 40 lands. I'm a stickler for that. That's pretty much that's my happy spot. Better players can skim lands when they see, mana ramps and stuff like that. I can't do it. Um, so this is a pretty much standard package if you watched any of the videos. Nothing remarkable in our lands here. Pretty much pain lands. Um, no, I don't think. Yeah, is there pain lands? I don't think there's pain lands. So we run all the fetch lands. So we're running 9 fetch lands and then we'll get this card so that we can put an artifact card. Um, and then we're running the battle lands. So enters tapped unless you control 2 or more opponents. Probably will. We're running the shock lands, Cavern of Souls, so that we make Yuna uncounterable. And then of course for the command tower we have to run the Final Fantasy X one. It's just the law. Like you have to. Like you'll get arrested if you don't. And of course for the land we're gonna choose our favorite Final Fantasy X land, with the exception of Island because that's Besaid Village. And if you don't use Yuna's hometown village for her deck, why build the deck? Like what are you even building the deck for? Like just build a different deck. Um, yeah, that's pretty straightforward for our lands. Nothing spectacular except here we go. You definitely want to try to include this. Hall of Heliod's Generosity. You can tap 2 and tap this to put target enchantment card from your graveyard on top of your library, which again is all your summons. So that's something you definitely want to get in this deck. But other than that, that's the deck. She's very powerful. This will probably be the first deck that we actually have footage of. I'm going to build this deck as quickly as I can on MTGO, and I'll record/stream some of those videos, and hopefully she'll defeat all of her opponents time after time. With that, if you've made it to the end of this video, like, subscribe, comment down below what you think of the deck, any changes you would make to the deck. Thanks for watching to the end. I know it was a lot. I'll get better at this. See you guys later. Bye.